Today we are going to talk about securing the home game advantage, which is an impression management tactic. Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, specialized in communication psychology in international, intercultural, and multilingual contexts. Let's talk a bit about the term impression management. In the literature, you find also self-presentation theory. You remember maybe our communication square. Every time we send a message, we communicate something verbally or non-verbally. The listener can unpack this according to four aspects or four sides of a square. The first one is the objective information, the so-called facts we want to convey. The other side is information about ourselves. Whether we want it or not, the other person will form an impression of us. The third one is the relationship between the speaker and the listener. And the fourth one is the call to action, the appeal side. What do I, the speaker, want the listener to do or not to do after listening to me? Impression management is focused on the second side, on self-revelation. Now, initially, the term was considered describing something negative, something deceptive. People trying to act as imposters, trying to create false impressions of themselves. However, impression management is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everyone does it. And it's not necessarily something bad. It's quite important for smooth social interactions. It simply means we care for what other people think about us during an interaction. So I, as a speaker, I'm interested in putting my best foot forward and not making too many mistakes like the previous one. And you want to dress according to the situation. If we don't care, then we risk engaging in antisocial behavior. Now, there are extremes. There are people who are overly conscious of the impressions they make. So they may have stage fright. They may be afraid to appear in public, like social phobia, the fear of public speaking, of being judged, labeled by others, enters here. On the other hand, there are people who care too little. You may think about all the politicians you dislike, what characteristics they have. Probably they have one, which is they don't care for your values and for some basic ways of behaving yourself publicly. Now, securing the home game advantage means that in a conversation, you want to covertly or overtly steer the conversation to areas where you can present yourself positively. That means that you have special areas of expertise, you have life experiences. For example, you have been to certain countries, you may have visited China, you know certain languages, you have certain connections, and you may observe this is a homework, a home assignment, that in group discussions, professionally and privately, people who are more concerned with impression management, because we have interpersonal differences, there are people who are very much concerned for creating perfect impressions. They try to steer the conversation to their pet topics, to their topics of expertise. And if we have more players, more participants which are high on impression management, then there is some kind of under the surface struggle about in which direction we will steer the conversations so that I can secure my home game advantage. Now, it can be anything, like, for example, if I steer the conversation towards the Chinese economy, maybe I have luck and somebody remembers, oh, but Gerhard, you were in China. Please tell us more. So you will see that there are different ways to steer the conversation into this direction, quite blatantly, which is typically not well received in most societies, because most societies would view this as arrogant, as boastful. So all the boastful and arrogant energy, it goes a bit undercover, and it tries to do things indirectly. What I observed as a similar experience as securing the home game advantage is when people speak in different languages. And for example, I have language students, they have studied German, they go to Germany and Switzerland, and they report that very often the counterpart doesn't want to speak in German with them. And they immediately interpret this as, well, they don't accept my German accent, or I'm not good enough. But what actually may happen here is also some impression management phenomenon, because the student wants to speak German and thinks the other person from Switzerland or Germany will be very pleased that they can speak in their native language. However, the other person in Germany maybe is in a social setting other people are observing and wants to show how well he or she speaks English. And then there's my student wants to show that he or she speaks well German. And very, very often, many such situations, there's an initial struggle. Who will win? Which language we should speak? Now, a bit differently, in some situations, people will insist on speaking in their native language, especially if it's, for example, a political discussion or even a conflict, a negotiation. For example, if you live in a multi-ethnic country like I live here in Moldova, then people switch to their native language, assuming everybody will understand it, because they understand that in a conflict, they will be more efficient in expressing their ideas, and they will be judged as more secure, more confident. So if you have public debates of politicians, then if you're negotiating, debating in your native language, then you have the home game advantage language-wise. Good. What do you think? Do this as a small home assignment. If you are in a group discussion at work, try to observe if you feel somebody is pushing the direction into a topic that is his or her expertise. And observe yourself too. A classic example, which you may not have the opportunity to study so often, is in job selection procedures, like in so-called assessment centers. They often contain group exercises where candidates need to solve jointly a problem. Now, this is the perfect context for impression management. It's getting a job, and you have people sitting around taking notes. And if you're an observer, if you are working for a human resource department, then you should become more sensitive to this securing the home game advantage, because yes, you will be induced into believing the person is competent in all situations. You see him or her only for some minutes, and actually it may be very detrimental, because in many professional situations it's important not to show off how competent we are. Yes, impression management is important, so we can establish trust as an educator, as a lawyer, as a medical doctor. But in many situations, we need to leave our home game advantage and move to the stadium, to the area of expertise, of concerns, of problems of our counterpart. So we need to move into their direction, but if we always steer the discussions into our field of expertise, then we may systematically misunderstand our colleagues, customers. So if you are very concerned with impression management and you observe how you do this, then maybe you will try to diversify the topics you are able to converse. I myself do the same. For example, during this video, I chose the topic, so it gave me an advantage of preparation. And so watching this topic, maybe you get an impression that I'm competent in other topics of psychology or in general. But it probably is not the case. I'm focused on some areas of expertise, and you don't have the chance to test me in hundreds of different situations. Another example, a personal revelation. I made videos on language learning for many years, and I made them in different languages. And you could get the impression, well, he's doing this in 10, 20 different languages. So he speaks perfectly in all those languages. But as I could choose the topic I wanted to discuss, like learning a foreign language, motivation and techniques and so on, and then I had the home game advantage. If you had invited me to a public discussion about topics I'm not familiar with in those languages, like discussing sports or recipes or how to repair your car, then you would see my incompetence immediately, and you won't judge me as a competent speaker in all those languages. You just show me in my home game advantage. So please write some comments and maybe share some anecdotes you have observed professionally. See you next week. Bye bye.